Hello, and welcome to the Rollwise podcast. My name is Mike, one of your hosts, and I'm here with my good friends Brent
Hello, everybody.
and Jeff.
Hi, everyone.
This is our weekly show where we talk about pretty much anything and everything related to tabletop RPGs and sometimes, asterisks, sometimes, we might even talk about the news and other things that are tangential to RPGs, including video games, movies, and books. So this week, we are actually going to be talking a little bit about a tabletop RPG called the Dresden Files role-playing game, put out by Evil Hat some many years ago using the Fate system. And we're also going to be talking a little bit about Shadowrun, the 6th edition-ish thing that Brent's going to talk a little bit more about that. But we're going to talk a little bit about Shadowrun, some of its successes, some of its less successes, and some recent news about that game. So why don't we go ahead and get this party started? All right. Boom. So first of all, let's talk about the Dresden Files. Anybody that's a big fan of the Dresden universe and all that kind of stuff probably knows about this game. Now, because Dresden Files has been pretty popular for some many years. I don't know about you guys, but I actually got into the Dresden Files a little earlier. And it was because of a friend of mine. He read them, and he was a super big fan. And he was just like, okay, I'm going to tell you something here. The first 3 books are not good. And I was like, well, how many books do I have to read to get to the good stuff? And he's like, well, once you get into the 3rd book, you'll probably find that it starts to get good. And if I remember correctly, what you find is that the actual books themselves, like if I remember, this is back when I went to Norwest Con many years ago. We met Jim Butcher there, and he talked about how he was going to like creative writing school, and he was using creative writing school like his teachers to edit his chapters in his books. So he'd like have an assignment in school and all that stuff, and he would like have them edit the chapters and everything like that. And that's how you got Stormfront, the first book, and then I think Full Moon. I don't remember if Grey Peril had that same thing, but honestly started reading it towards maybe 2005, 2006. So there's probably about 6 books already published, but he publishes a lot of books, I guess. And I've enjoyed him ever since. Now, there was a break recently because we're up to 17 books. And he took a break between Skin Game in 2015, between that and Peace Talks. I think he had one, actually, there was like a side book with short stories in it. But those, between the 2 main books in those entries, a lot of things happened. And then, when he actually released 2 books in the same year, Peace Talks and Battlegrounds, and I have not had a chance to read those. But otherwise, Dresden Files, it has a pretty long and storied histories. So, Brent, you've read all the books?
No, I read quite a few, and then it just fell off for me. Like, it was enjoyable, but I feel like it's not like, once I get kind of a feel for the world, like it kind of gets repetitive. And so I really enjoyed the books that I read, but it definitely died off a little bit for me.
Yeah. And same thing with you, Jeff. You probably read a good chunk of those books, right?
I was late coming to Harry Dresden. I actually got into it because of the TV show. I know that like true fans are going to be horrified. I didn't hate the TV show, and even having read the books, I still don't hate the TV show. There were problems with it, but they did enough right to make me want to read the books, and I read them right up until about 2015, whenever that break happened, and I just haven't gone back to them. I think shortly after that, I started on Game of Thrones and then some other things, but he's a very good world builder. He does a lot of really neat stuff, and so I like the books. I like the character. I like the magic systems. I like. It's not my favorite. It's probably my favorite urban fantasy, and it's, from what I hear, way better than the Iron Druid saga. So we'll just throw that out there.
Whoa, let's stick with one book series here before we start going with other book series.
So I liked it. I like it a lot, and I will probably go back and read the other stuff. But God, It makes me feel like I'm going to have to read the last book that I read again, just so Or I'm gonna have to find a real good synopsis. Because
Yeah,
a
I would
lot
probably.
happened in that. A lot happened in that.
Yeah,
book.
I would probably have to reread the books to continue forward.
It's tricky because like the hard part about it for me is that like it's as soon as a book is out of mind for so many years, I remember really high level things like
Yep.
I remember the pub, McAnally's pub. I remember, the gentleman Marcone. I remember like good characters and some interactions and stuff like that. But there's a lot of details in all those books, and and you get to that point where you're like, okay. And as you said, he built a really, really kind of rich world. You had a lot of characters, introduced and all that kind of stuff. And so if you tried to like skip from what was it, Skin Game, and once you finish that in 2015 and 7 years later tried to jump onto Peace Talks or whatever it is, you're like, who's this character? Is it important? I don't know.
Yeah, I might have to find a real good synopsis.
Well, and there is and there towards the end there was quite a few characters too.
Oh yeah.
The scale and the scope just kept
Yeah.
expanding.
Which is why I stopped reading Game of Thrones. I like read the first book and I was like, Jesus, there's 5 million characters in this. I can't even imagine
Not for
what
long.
I can't even. Well, no, they die, so he can introduce new ones.
They killed off 100, so that left 4.99 million.
No, they kill off 100, and then they introduce 200. And I was like, I don't think I'm going to be able to stick up with this.
I still like Game of Thrones. I'm not as crazy about it as other people, but
I enjoyed the first book. I will say
that's
that.
fair.
It was good, but
he does some things really well.
And I got through a lot of Wheel of Time until I don't know, the drugs really started to take hold or whatever.
You need to grind through that slow part of Wheel of Time, because I just finished that last year finally, because that was another one of those series where I caught up to the real, the real time, and it was right before he got real sick. Jordan did, and then handed it off to Sanderson, and I vowed that I wouldn't read it, finish it until like it was finished, because I was tired of the 3-year wait between books. But honestly, the last 3 books make grinding through a couple of those ones in the late middle that are
those are dense
pooptastic.
Those are dense reads too. That's the problem I had with Wheel of Time. It was like,
they are, yeah.
And you pick up the book and you're like, wow, this book's heavy, and then you're like, these pages are paper thin, and that text is small.
Well, I'll be honest. I think the first book is called like The Eye of the World or something like that for Wheel of Time. Like, because back in the day when it was the talk of all my friends and we were looking at like fantasy and all that stuff, I picked up The Eye of the World or whatever, and I started reading it. There's just those authors you don't jive with, and if we get persecuted and we lose all of our subscribers, I'm sorry. Robert Jordan was just not one.
Okay.
I really, really like some of the characters, but they all seem to be weird parodies themselves at some point for me. And I was like, I'm just not into this anymore.
There's a weird maturation process of the characters where at times I hated almost all of them. Not at the same time.
Right.
But there were books or sections of books or most of books where I was like, fucking hate this character. I can't do this.
I'm gonna have to slog through this entire chapter dedicated to this character.
Yeah,
and I don't know if I can do it.
I will say when I finally did finish it,
it was worth it.
It was one of the best ended series ever.
But
in my mind,
the question is do you owe that to Sanderson or do you owe that to Jordan himself? That's the question. Because Sanderson is proving to me to be.
I think it's honestly, I think it was Sanderson, but Jordan has a lot of highlights.
And it's still his ideas.
The first book is good, but not great. You know what I mean? So, sorry, we were talking about Dresden.
No.
This is
whatever.
This is what happens when Mike and Brent and I get together and we talk for hours on end.
I'm sure the listeners are aware of this by now.
But needless to say, I haven't read the Wheel of Time series.
No,
I probably should at some point in my life.
It's like 14 books. It's even on audiobook. It is a.
They are dense. They are long. Like that's what I remember about I think I read the first 5 or something like that. And it was like, oh, these are long. I remember like the tactile feeling of picking up the book and looking at it and being like, oh, this is a brick. And then I looked at it and I was like, oh, these pages are tissue paper. So there's a lot of them in here, and
Mhm.
that text is small, and like they fit as much into those books as they could. So it's like a commitment to read those books. If it's worth it, that's interesting. But yeah, I don't know. It's a series that I've never really wanted to go back to. But
you will live
know
a
what?
long and full life by not. But if you
But
do, I think you will find a reward.
I did enjoy the first few parts of it. But anyways, back to the Dresden game.
Back to the Dresden Files. So it was published back in 2010 by Evil Hat Productions, and it used the Fate system for kind of its gameplay and mechanics and everything like that. And now for me, I haven't really played a lot of Fate. I mean, I played in the 20 the 2000s. I maybe played just a tiny little bit, and in the 2010s I played none, because there was a dry spell in there for games. I think you guys remember, moved over to Baltimore, and I didn't play that many games, honestly. Just no one to role play with. And so like there's a long time between the last time I really even thought about Fate as a role playing system and now. So it's kind of, just as kind of a refresher, I was reading through the Dresden Files core book and everything like that. And so when you think about it, we're not necessarily adhering to all the principles of it, which I think it would probably be a richer experience if you did. But one of the things that they start with is that when you're generating characters, is that character creation is play. And I've had many experiences where we've started playing at the table, generating characters as we were kind of getting into, the kind of idea, the thought process, and all that kind of stuff. Have you guys had that experience where you've like maybe had already a preconceived character, and then you just kind of put them to paper and we're already going before the adventure even started? Or am I just a crazy person?
I have a couple of times. I do try now to get something down. I am the horrible procrastinator. Like I'm the guy that the DMs hate, because it's like, oh no, I got an idea and I'm working on it, and then you get the sheet like 5 seconds before the game starts, or halfway through the first session. I'm that guy. I just gotta own it. So I have done it, and with some systems you can kind of get away with it, right? Where they're not super crunchy. And Fate, I think, was my first exposure to a system that was really a lot more storytelling heavy. And so I could see it working in a Fate-based game. Like some systems it works in, some it just doesn't, because you're literally making stuff up until you have stats in some systems.
Yeah, I usually have a good idea of what character I want to play. Like I have an idea of a character I want to play, and I try to make the numbers fit that. The problem is that sometimes games I wind up creating characters that don't fit into the game when I have a really solid idea. And so they change a little bit. But I usually try to have some idea after reading a little bit about the world and like what's going on. And then kind of get an idea of the mechanics. I usually try to have some idea, but I've never played a game where character creation was part of play, really.
Yeah. So there's actually 3 things that they do as part of this to reinforce it. The first one is that since the character creation is telling the character's story, it's basically, this is a time for you to like share your history and everything like that. So like, what has your character been doing? What kind of upbringing did they have? What kind of family did they come from? And I do think that there's at least in the Dresden Files, you can be quite a few different types of characters. But if you're focusing on being a wizard, it's like, well, how did you become a wizard and all that kind of stuff? And this is your kind of time to share that. And there's a lot more collaboration that I think goes into that. And so because that's kind of one of the other aspects that they say is that it's super collaborative to go through the storytelling process. And even one of the components of it, talks about, well, what was your first adventure? What was your relationship to this other character and all that kind of stuff? And you do some of those things so that, when you get to those parties that are, your average D&D party, you meet in an inn, you all seem to be carrying the same letter. What's happened next? What happens next is a little bit different than that. And then, of course, they suggest that each, this is kind of what sets the stage for your actual story arc. And I think that that's similar to other games we've been playing. When we're doing Fabula Ultima, we're doing the prologue, but you guys are doing kind of like an individual role-playing session about your prologue and everything like that, and that's kind of reinforcing your character. I think that's the same concept that they're doing here. You're just doing it in a more fluid kind of spitball-y fashion until you coalesce into that group kind of at the end, and then you go straight into the story or whatever that may be. But that's kind of, I mean, it's kind of neat how they have that out. We're not doing that just because we have a little bit of a different dynamic with our group set up, and then of course we play only every 2 weeks on this one, so the forever DM is playing once in a while. I'll take it, even if I don't do it exactly how the book wants me to. I'll take it if I get to play.
Well, I was the forever DM until you started running games, so it's been a nice break for me. So
yeah,
thank you for that.
I love DMing. It's no problem. It's just every once in a while there's a little hair that tickles.
Oh yeah, so do I, and there definitely is some reward to playing in a game once in a while and not running it all the time. But yeah, no, I think that's cool. Like, that's a pretty narrative. The collaborative group making is every narrative game's attempt to not meet in an end. And so I think that's very important, and I think that's actually where Session Zero started, was storytellers not wanting to be like your elf, dwarf, gnome, halfling all meet in a bar and decide, hey, we didn't want to stab each other right away, we can go ahead and adventure together.
They walk into a bar and now you're friends.
Exactly.
I'm sure there's a joke about
which I know. So another tangent here that's kind of interesting is I know a lot of people are against that. Like, well, why would these characters all be together? And it's like, can you think of a cohesive reason why you're friends with all of them? Like, can you pick 5 of your friends and go, we're friends because most of the time it's just, I don't know, we hung out until we just stopped until we just hung out all the time.
Yeah, until we just decided we applied that obligatory label by society.
Yeah,
friends,
like, exactly.
Party.
Yeah, exactly. Like, so, like, no matter how loose it is, it's like, yeah, well, real life is kind of like that, where it's just like, oh, I like this person, I talk to them a lot,
yeah,
and you just kind of with them all the time.
Okay, it works for me.
So, like, I know people say it's always ridiculous, but that was my counter argument to that for a while. It's like, tell me why you hang out with your friend. What skill do they have that you need them to have, and that's why you hang out with them? Well, no, I just like being around them. Okay, that's as valid as we met in a tavern, in my opinion.
It is.
Well, and that is your dose of sociology today, brought to you by Brent. Why are people friends? Why are you friends?
Trauma bonding. That's usually the real answer. We were in a tavern together and it exploded, and we were the 5 survivors.
Yeah.
And we had to find out who did it, obviously. So we were unified in our objective.
Exactly.
Geez. So once you kind of get into the collaborative idea of like how your character is coming together, like and start working that out, one of the things you're going to start with is something called a high concept. Well, I guess first of all, you choose a template. Back it up. I missed that step. You choose a template. Now, templates are basically packages that you use to kind of like encapsulate your character, and they talk about like what supernatural powers and stuff that you would have, and how the template itself kind of informs the rest of your decisions, because its musts have to be fulfilled before you can kind of pick the little kind of ancillary things and all those that kind of stuff. So with this one, we decided to be like a were group, a bunch of were animals that are working together, because why not? We decided we didn't want to be wizards for some reason. Obviously, we played Dresden Files, and we decided not to be wizards or any spellcasters of any sorts. We decided to be more like the alphas, which were kind of cool themselves. So if you guys remember, the alphas, the werewolf group of D&D players that played with Harry Dresden and whatever it was. So we decided to take the were form character for most of that. And we're starting off at kind of a low power level. So this isn't going to be an epic game. I'm informed that it's going to be a very episodic thing, just because the last time we ran a game on the Sunday, it was a little epic. And then it got attacked by scheduling demons. And by the time we got our band back together, we had no fucking clue what the hell the epic storyline was and what we were supposed to be doing. It was really, really tricky.
As will happen
Yeah.
if you take a long layoff.
Yeah, so we're gonna try to keep it a little bit lighter, a little bit more, monster of the week or something like that. We'll see how it all turns out. So once you have that done, you get your high concept. Now the concept is gonna be it's gonna describe your character. It could be like your job, what you do in life, and all that kind of stuff. And it's basically an idea that um, it's one of your first aspects, and how you use fate points and everything like that is like tying everything to your aspects, is my understanding. And it's an important part of gameplay, so that your concept, as you're playing your game, you can, once you're using fate points or whatever it is, that's how you involve yourself in the story. Now I could be explaining this wrong because I may be misunderstanding, but I'll know more by Sunday.
No, I remember you have an aspect, and your aspect dictates does it allow you to reroll if you can invoke your aspect?
So there's two things about aspects. You can basically invoke to do something, or you can, like, I invoke an aspect because it is, this is directly related to saving people, and I have to help those in need. That's my aspect, right? Or it can be compulsed by the game master, if I recall, and they can make you help somebody in need.
Right, they can say
there's like two sides to that.
Yeah, they can say this is your one of your main motivations. You really need to do this.
Yeah, you can't act outside your character boundary.
Right.
So the high concept is basically like the topmost part of that umbrella in deciding like what that is, and it's accompanied by what's called a trouble. A trouble is basically your complication, and it's, if the high concept is the what or who, the trouble is that, like, what makes your life hard. So in Harry Dresden's case, he's a wizard for hire, but his complication is that he's really Harry Dresden.
Right.
And that obviously comes with enough baggage in itself.
Semi-famous wizard, yeah.
But like having a complication, like him being a wizard, obviously he couldn't use technology, right? He couldn't have a cell phone because wizardy bits made that stuff really hard.
Yeah, technology didn't work.
Yeah. So once you have your concept and everything like that, you start building up. You kind of start building from there, and you kind of build out additional archetypes through the actual session 0 and everything like that you're playing with, and then you eventually end up with a character that's relatively simple, but at the end is very narratively able to make some decisions based on how the story comes into it. You do have skills and stuff in the game, and you do have stunts that are special abilities that are that provide some kind of unique advantages and stuff like that. But I'll describe those at a later time if we decide to do more of a deep dive into the actual fate system and all that. Right now, I'm just more interested in the fact that there's like fate dice. They have negatives, positives, and blanks.
It has its own role. It has a kind of a different role mechanic.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and so when you have like your fate dice and everything like that, I believe like when you roll your fate dice, the negatives cancel out the positives, and you'll either have a positive, negative, or neutral outcome. Yep. That's correct.
I believe so.
Yeah. So we'll see how it all turns out. But basically, the character that I've created, I've decided, because we're playing in Baltimore, so that's really the funny part about it is that I'm like, oh, I know a little bit about Baltimore since I happen to live there, and so it's kind of fun reminiscing about certain parts about Baltimore.
Is the character's name Oriole?
Oriole? No. But do you guys know that what where form I went with?
Well, I think you told us last week it was a raven, right?
Yes, it's a raven because ravens are Baltimore friendly. So, yeah, because of Edgar Allan Poe, right? He was there.
It's true. And
I'm pretty sure that's why they named the NFL franchise.
Yeah,
the Ravens.
Yep, it was because of that. So yeah, basically, decided to go with a character that is a descendant, a hidden descendant of Edgar Allan Poe, because obviously in reality he didn't have any children. But this is fantasy. He can have a hidden lineage or whatever it is. A pocket watch that found its way into my character's hands is what allows him to transform into the Raven. because why not? And we're going to go from there. So
I think that sounds cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like I said, the person who was running the Dresden File game, I super enjoyed the Dresden File game that he ran for Jeff and I back in the day. So
it was really good.
Yeah. Climax beef jerky came up a lot, I remember, in that game.
Yes, we had a lot of fun with that. It is an actual beef jerky brand based out of Denver, Colorado. Since we were in the Denver airport,
Yeah.
all the kiosks were selling Climax beef jerky.
Yes.
Was it some Eldritch thing, just to make sure?
Nope.
No.
Just a juvenile thing that Brent laughed at
thing that he threw in.
for about 4 hours.
Yep.
Yep.
Local knowledge.
Yeah. Well, I also was the sex vampire, the pre-sex vampire, so it was like a double funny thing to me at the time.
And it should be. I mean, honestly, it should be. I have to say though, like in terms of narrative games, we've been hitting the narrative games pretty hard. I'll be interested to see how this game stacks up to Fabula Ultima, and I bet there's some other narrative games we could probably throw in the ring. We could probably do some of that Apocalypse World. We haven't played that one. I haven't even touched Apocalypse World. I know what it is, but
I wouldn't. The problem with Apocalypse World now is Apocalypse World is probably the weakest offering of the Apocalypse World rules, which is funny. There's probably other games that do the rules better at this point. Like I think Monster of the Week and even Cult uses a variation of the Apocalypse rules now, powered by Apocalypse.
Mm-hmm.
Powered by the Apocalypse, the actual Apocalypse World game. Like I've read it a couple times. It's a weird game to me.
Yeah.
There's things in it that are interesting choices. Like, and we didn't plan on talking about Apocalypse World, but we'll talk about it a little bit because you brought it up.
Might as well.
Like characters get certain advantages if they've been intimate with other characters or other NPCs in the game, which is a weird thing to put in there. Yeah, intimate in quotes. Yes, deep quotes.
It's not just sex, Brent. It's just mostly sex.
No, it mostly is sex in the book. Actually, it actually calls that out.
Did they kind of give you a range? It's just like petting is up here.
No, it pretty much said if you've had sex with this person, you get an advantage on these moves.
This is the way.
Yeah, which was just a weird choice. And then like I remember one of the other things that's really memorable about Apocalypse World is like there's the D&D section, which is like, don't you fucking plan for a game ever. Don't you fucking make any plans. That's not your responsibility. And so like one of the main things with Apocalypse World is you have to go into it and it's 100% generated by everyone. Like you don't have a plot. Like the plot comes up through play. And the few times I've seen it run, it comes across as kind of clunky. Because it's kind of like herding cats. So the playbooks are really cool. Like there's a lot of playbooks that are really cool, but I think there's games that have used the system better now. But I think they're bigger. It's funny because they're bigger games than powered by they're bigger games than Apocalypse World. Like Dungeon World, I think probably is a bigger game. Monster of the Week is probably a better game,
isn't it?
No, they're different. They're different publishers.
Really?
Because Apocalypse World is completely open source. Like he said, anybody can use this rule set or bastardize this rule set all you want. He left it totally open, so people have taken advantage of it. Like Cult is barely Apocalypse World. Like it's in there, but like it has moves and stuff, but like it doesn't have playbooks really. And it's very much a GM generated game. Like so there's like philosophical things in there, but it's not really powered by the Apocalypse, I wouldn't say.
So here's our call to action to you, audience. If you're listening and you say, you know what, you've talked about some narrative games. Maybe you've heard of Fabula Ultima. Maybe you've played it. Maybe you've heard of, the Dresden Files or Fate or something like that. Maybe you played it. What is your favorite narrative game from a narrative perspective? Cinematic, doesn't matter. Narrative focus rather than heavy mechanics. What do you think we should play? Let us know. Comments somewhere below. All that jazz.
Hey, and if you're going to leave a comment, do all the other YouTube-y stuff. Like, subscribe. ding the bell.
Way to segue into the plugs, gentlemen. We appreciate your hard work on that.
Okay, now that that's done, yeah. So I think well, I mean, maybe that isn't the best PBTA game to play. Maybe there's better
I wouldn't
ones.
want to run a Powered by the. I wouldn't want to run an Apocalypse World game if that tells you anything. I'd rather run I want to run a Monster of the Week game. I want to try that, and I would like to run Cult at some point.
Yeah.
But I have to find the right group of mentally ill people to run the Cult game.
Well, you know what? You have two mentally ill people right here. I don't know. I don't know if I'm speaking for myself in this.
There's a joke in there about us playing with our different personalities.
It's a Brent horror game, which sometimes people react strongly to. Is all. So
just make it creepy, and it'll be great.
Creepy. That's the word. But anyways, speaking of complex rules, we should talk about Shadowrun now.
That was a double segue. I don't think I could have planned that any
transitions are getting better, guys.
I think good segues are unplanned. The best ones are always the ones that you come up and then talk about for 2 or 3 minutes after.
Yeah, so get this shit moving, Brent.
The best segues.
Let's talk about Shadowrun. Are you talking about 6th edition specifically, or are you going to talk about something Shadowrun?
I'm going to talk a little bit about. I'm going to talk about Catalyst Games, the current company that owns the rights to Shadowrun. A little bit about 6th edition, and a little bit just kind of in general. And this is my chance to bag on a different gaming company than Wizards of the Coast. So everybody should be proud of me. So recently, Catalyst put out a Kickstarter for a board game, a Shadowrun board game, which I'm sure the board game is going to be a lot of fun. I haven't really looked at the board game at all. But one of the reasons that they did that this comes up is because as they were putting out the board game, there is a real play that's been posted on the YouTube channel, Real Smith. They do real plays, and they're doing a real play game, Shadowrun Excommunication, which Catalyst has sponsored for them. And one of the things that I think is funny about it is in the first 10 minutes of the first podcast and the first real play episode, he says, "Oh yeah, we're not using their 6th edition rule set." He says, we're using their 5th edition Anarchy rule set with parts of the 6th World book sprinkled in, which basically means we're not using your complex 6th edition game, and we're using your narrative edition old game because 6th edition is too hard and complicated and silly. And I just think it's funny because I think it's weird that Catalyst didn't make some caveat saying we'll sponsor you, but you have to use the new system so people buy it.
Right.
I think that's strange. And B, how is Catalyst not trying to pump out a new edition of the game? Because I don't think 6th edition really worked out for them. And that's kind of just kind of my wonderings about this today. Because when we played 6th edition, I ran a game of 6th edition for Mike and another friend of mine, and eventually we got through a healthy. I think we got through 4 or 5 sessions of the game, and eventually we realized that there were just a lot of disconnects in the rules. The biggest one being for us that stood out was that I think your character was trying to use your weeb was coming out and you were trying to use a samurai sword or something like that, I think. And we were looking at the rules for it, and strength did not modify your ability to do extra damage with a sword at all. It was unconnected to any sort of melee attack. And that sort of rule is just takes you completely out of the game a little bit because it doesn't make any sense. So yeah, what are your thoughts on Catalyst sponsoring a game that's not actually using their rules?
I think it's amazing because first of all, the one thing that it's also based on the little bit I know about Shadowrun's inner workings and stuff like that. If I remember correctly, I don't think that Catalyst has they have a small core of writers, but I think they use a lot of freelancers, don't they, for most of their stuff?
Probably. I think a lot. I think that's what most gaming companies do now.
I got that impression and stuff like that. So the fact, I just wonder if anybody that's actually written the 6th edition stuff is just who cares? I mean, there's only like 3 people at corporate headquarters that even give a shit. So you guys, as long as you're talking about Shadowrun and keeping us relevant, we don't care.
Well,
But yeah,
has
if they're just trying to pop the name, right, for the board game Kickstarter, then I guess I can see the plan. But man, it is fully admitting defeat that you are sponsoring something where they're like, we are not using that product.
Yeah, it physically detract like anybody
the thing
who's
that you can
watch,
readily get books for. Yeah, they're not using.
Anybody that watches the show is going to be like, oh, I should look into picking up Shadowrun Anarchy. They're not going to look up into picking up your 6th edition new hotness. I mean, new, it's a couple years old now, but like it's your most recent version of the game.
Well, and so like in what little research I've seen here is that basically Shadowrun, there's 2 things that kind of have happened since the 6th edition release. Because when I thought when we played, it was actually relatively close to when the edition was launched. Like we were really excited about it because I think you, me, and the other player, because this is a 3-person group, we all have a love of Shadowrun. I like Shadowrun more because of just the setting, and I like the video games quite a bit. What was it? There were 3 games I think that they put out on PC, plus some other weird ones that were just honestly very fun and very awesome to play. I enjoyed the hell out of them. But the 6th edition rules and everything like that, so when they were released, basically there were 2 problems, right? Well, more than 2 problems. There were the design choices for what they decided to how the game would play, and then there was just the fact that the product wasn't very good quality. Like a lot of typos, a lot of weird stuff like that. And from what I've understood is that it seems as though they fixed a lot of like the typos, errata, and stuff like that, and they put it into the Seattle edition, which is, I guess, the newest printing or something like that. So there is a book out there that tries to help, but there's still some core concepts that obviously that's not an errata. That's a core concept of the thing. And if you didn't like some of the core concepts at launch with 6th edition, you're still not.
You're still in that place.
You're still not enjoying 6th edition. And so I don't know, but I think if you just want to be relevant and talked about,
right,
and they wanted to play the Anarchy rules, then...
and I will add that I love Shadowrun. Shadowrun was actually my first RPG. I played it before Dungeons and Dragons, so like it was the first game I ever played. So for me, it's like has a nostalgia love, and I love the setting, and I love that kind of cyberpunk and fantasy mix that they managed in that I felt like they balanced really well. But like, man, those 6th edition rules really weren't good, and I just can't. And it was just one of those things. Yeah, I guess it gets your name out there again, like, because I definitely went to listen to it. But it was just funny to me that it was just like, oh yeah, we're not using your actual new edition. We're using your not only an old edition. We're not even using like your last edition. We're using the rules light version of your last edition that came out a couple years after. And it's just like, it just surprised me because it's like, which I think one of the things I will say in kind of our discussions is I think it really proves kind of the idea that I think the more narrative versions as opposed to these really heavy crunch games, I think they're just easier for people to get into. They're easier for people to play. And I really kind of hope Catalyst kind of takes that to heart a little bit in the next version of the game that they make, because having Shadowrun be its age-old 3 systems for magic, decking, matrix stuff, and it was 4 systems because you had the magic stuff, you had the decking stuff, you had the rigor stuff, the like card combat stuff, and then you had your actual like one-on-one combat stuff, and then you can kind of say that the melee combat is different than the fighting combat. So having these like 4 or 5 separate crunchy systems all in the same game, like it's just not necessary in modern games.
I mean that's a lot, even with an old school, even with a game that has been around for that long, to go through that many editions. That's
yeah, it is a lot, and like and there's things that you have to memorize for each one, or they don't work. And I do remember. It's funny.
Sounds like it's best run by a computer program, Brent.
And the funny thing,
a video game.
Yeah, exactly. And the best part about you were saying the design choices were funny in the 6th edition. I do remember now that it had and this is usually a problem with Shadowrun. It had a lot of like indexing issues where like you'd go to a page. It did my favorite thing that role playing books do sometimes, where it says see page 27, and then you go to page 27, and then it says see page 104, and then you wind up flipping the pages for like 5 minutes, and you still haven't found what you needed to find. I do remember that happening with that book.
That is frustrating. That is an old school thing. Or I hate when they send you to 4 different pages and then it's please see errata published under and this, and it's like, oh my god, I'm gonna
please mail in for the errata for this book.
Yeah.
But I just it was just one of those funny observations of like, yes, Catalyst will be out there, Shadowrun name will be out there, but they definitely aren't selling the new product. They're selling the board game, maybe, but I mean, they're not really selling a board game. The guy said, "Oh yeah, there's a board game on Kickstarter," but it's not like they're playing the board game.
Oh yeah, this is sponsored, and we're supposed to say that they have a board game now.
This is sponsored, and they have a board game that really captures the feel of Shadowrun.
I'm sure they're doing what I'm sure they're living up to whatever their end of the contract is. I don't know them at all.
I'm just saying that Catalyst seems like maybe they didn't have very much in their sponsor. There's just sort of sure, whatever. Which hey, that's cool too. But I just think that they could have, I don't know. Like I would like to see a new playable version of Shadowrun versus what I feel like is a mess now. And I would like to run a Shadowrun game again, but I think I probably would indeed, as they said in the podcast, use the Anarchy rules because I think it's probably easier.
Well, and maybe there's something to that because like I think when you guys you're talking about Shadowrun and stuff like that, I've never loved Shadowrun rules. I've loved the world of Shadowrun. I've liked the
concept has always been cool.
Like all of a sudden one day people became trolls and other things, and like, oh shit! All of a sudden there were dragons in the world and magic returned, and oh god, like. I like I liked its attempt at kind of like future sci fantasy cyberpunk. There's just a lot going on in there that were really enjoyable. Now, don't get me wrong, like I'm definitely not as deep into Shadowrun as Brent is. I've always had kind of like a Shadowrun shiny for the moment kind of feel to it, and I've enjoyed it, especially when the computer games came out. They were tactical RPGs, tactical action RPGs, I think. And they were good times. I did play the Super Nintendo one back in the day, and that one was hot garbage.
Wow.
It wasn't very Shadowrun either. The SNES version was, not SNES. The Super Nintendo version was not very Shadowrun, but the Sega one was very Shadowrun.
I never played the Sega one, but
yeah, it was very Shadowrun.
But yeah, no, I have to say, but I think there is some credence to say that if you created a narrative version where you played around in the world and enjoyed that kind of rich lore that is built over so many years, then you could probably have a good time with it.
I did enjoy back in the day in Shadowrun. I did enjoy running just handfuls of D6s though. That was kind of fun.
Oh, you're talking like all of a sudden you'd be like,
yeah, where you could go to websites and you look it up and you're like D6s and they're like the Shadowrun package and it's like a literal pound of D6s that you can buy because you'd need them all. That's kind of fun too on a just purely like aesthetic level. But yeah. I just think it was just interesting to me that it's kind of I guess that's what Jeff said earlier is really what I kind of want. It's just like an admission of a defeat, kind of, in my opinion, where it's like, yeah, we're going to sponsor these people and they're not going to use the rules they probably should be if we want to sell this book anymore. They're going to use the old rules and we're just going to let them advertise for that. Sure.
Well, and I mean, how many years ago did Shadowrun 6th edition come out? You'd be lucky to have another edition coming out this quickly, right? Is it in only 2018?
Was it in 2021? Was it 2018? How long ago was it?
Shadowrun. Let me look.
I didn't think it was too long ago, but I mean, obviously there was a time warp of a couple years in there where shit just went on pause, but time didn't.
Oh, 2019. It's not as old as I thought it was.
Yeah, the fact that they're
it feels so old.
Well, and the fact that they're still creating, like, putting out errata for the game and stuff like that. And again, if you don't like some of the core concept of gameplay that they've introduced in 6th edition, that they'll never make it. You'll never get to the next edition fast enough. But it's my understanding is that they've been improving it, and now that they have, I think they've done a lot of like you can include these optional rules to improve the game as well. So like there's a, I think there was an entire book that dedicated themselves to like some of the additional. I think it's something like called the Six World Companion, maybe. I think that might be it.
Well, they usually put out a companion book that allows for different styles of play. Like 5th edition had the Runner's Black Book, which was like you could play Rags to Runners games and stuff like that. So I'm sure they put one of those out. But
yeah, that's what it is. It's actually the Six World Companion, and it basically has alternate character creation methods, new meta types, new qualities, rules variations, etc., etc. So there may be a way to bolt together a version,
a good game,
a game of 6th edition that you appreciate out of Shadowrun between the Seattle edition and the core companion. And all that
I may have to check them out, but
so I'm just saying is
maybe Catalyst Gamut worked on one failed Shadowrun fan. Fallen Shadowrun fan? I don't know.
I don't know, man. All I'm saying is that as much I like the game enough that I would at least see if there was a way to cobble together a game out of this. But the problem is I think you'd have to play a lot of Shadowrun to figure out what works and what didn't, and that's a lot of bad Shadowrun to get there.
Exactly.
Yeah,
exactly. Well, it's just a lot of moments where it's like, oh, I'm gonna have to spend 15 minutes looking up these rules to try and figure out how this combat works, which is exactly what I don't want.
Exactly, and I think, and that might be why it's better to play the 5th edition Anarchy rules on stream than whatever amalgamation of stuff. Because imagine if they did play 6th edition and they had kind of cobbled together their own rule set that was really good. And then you as the player went to go buy the book and you were like, this isn't how they play.
This isn't the game that they're playing. Yeah. This isn't the game that they're playing.
Maybe set in the same world, but what the fuck are they doing this different than
Exactly.
Yeah. So that's my story and I'm sticking to it. So Shadowrun 6 World Character Companion plus the Seattle edition may or may not
may get me where I want to be. Okay.
Yeah, may or may
if
not
you
get
homebrew
you
half of it.
Yeah, that exactly. I'll just.
I'm not trying to pile on. I have not played it.
I'll just sit down and start rewriting
your judgment. And almost everything I've read online is even the people that try to defend it very tentatively. Like, it is. It was not successful. It just wasn't for whatever
it's considered
reason.
The worst edition of the game, I think, from what I read.
And
I have seen real plays that just absolutely stopped because they were like, we just don't feel like we can run this game.
Yeah, I read that. Like one of the first ones when it first came out, like they just were like, it's too clunky. We cannot do this.
Although, to be fair though, what is your favorite edition?
Ooh, that's a question for Brent.
Yeah, so I mean, I think I can tell you my favorite edition, but I mean I've only played a handful of Shadowrun games, so it's not meaningful for me to share what I liked.
I know it by the cover, so 1 second.
Spoken? No, there have not been truer role-playing words spoken on this podcast. I know it by the cover.
I just looked at the book a lot. I didn't read
exactly. I'm not making fun of you. You're 100% right, Brent. We all do that.
I suspect it's Shadowrun 4th edition.
Yeah, the third edition and 4th edition were probably the two.
Mm-hmm.
The two, yeah, 100% right.
Yeah, 4th edition was my.
Third edition was mine, but 4th edition and 3rd edition were pretty similar, if I remember right.
Yeah, I don't think I actually played anything in 3rd edition, but that's okay. I may have, but then again, it's like when you go to cons and stuff like that, and you just end up at a table and you play a game, and somebody tells you to roll fucking dice, you roll dice. So like,
exactly. Do the dice.
So, yeah. So, what else did you have to share about Catalyst and their interesting marketing move?
Go check out their board game, I guess.
What's the name of their board game?
Shit, I didn't look at that. I'm not interested in the board game.
But
why not, Brent?
In case anybody's wondering, Catalyst did not sponsor this stream. So.
Yeah, apparently not. And nor will they ever.
Well, maybe not now, anyway.
Oh, Jesus.
Crossfire?
I have liked a lot of Catalyst products.
No, not Crossfire. Shit, I have no idea.
Are you sure it was a board game?
Yeah, they said it was a board game on the podcast or
Okay,
on the
well, maybe
real player.
is it maybe called Edge Zone?
God, I hope it's called Edge Zone because that's
You would
terrible.
hope that Shadowrun
That is a
would be
terrible.
in there, right?
That is a terrible. Shadowrun Edge Zone is a terrible name for anything.
Well, so Shadowrun Edge Zone was funded in 45 minutes. It started. It looks like it is an old.
If it's
game.
still going, it has to be it. If it's not still going,
it seems like it's about to be fulfilled. Maybe.
I think it's Shadowrun Takedown is the board game.
Takedown.
Yeah.
Maybe.
In the board game Shadowrun Takedown, you and your friends assume the roles of runners, serving as mercenaries and deniable assets of powerful mega corporations.
Yeah,
and
it looks like it's in 40 minutes. Huh.
Yeah. When did it end? September 6th. This is it. Shadowrun Takedown is what it is. It
ended September 6th, so it ended
last updated September
yesterday.
6th.
Oh, last updated September 6th.
Yeah, but I think it is funded.
Yeah.
Well, not
so.
I think it's over and funded is what I mean.
Yeah, it looks like it. I mean, it said it was funded in 40 minutes. So, I mean, I'm not sure how much they were trying to go for, but yeah, you can't pledge anything right now because.
Yep. Yeah, I think it finished yesterday.
Oh man, we're even shitty at advertising this because now, I mean, I guess that maybe there's
I'm sure there's going to be a backer kit for.
Yeah.
They made 10 times. They made 10 times what they asked for, so I think it's fine.
Yeah. I'm sure. Well, I'm sure there'll be a backer kit. Takedown is what it's called.
Yeah,
Takedown.
Backer kit. Well, and backer kit's not the only company doing it now, but everybody wants those late pledges, especially on successful stuff.
Yeah. That's how I got into the weird. Is I did it through backer kit, not through Kickstarter.
And I would be interested in the board game, but God, I don't get enough people together to play board games hardly ever. So.
Well, you know how you get to do this is you get one of our other friends who already has 1 gajillion board games.
So it might be a little early for backer kit, but
yeah.
I will plug one other thing though. Kickstarter or it's on BackerKit. Apparently, BackerKit is doing they're doing their own crowdfunding now, not just as part of Kickstarter.
Oh, right.
But Ross Payton from Role Playing Public Radio, one of my favorite role playing resources and real podcasts, is putting out the Night Clerk, which is a system agnostic set of adventures. Architectural horror adventures. So if people are interested in that.
Okay. So what you're saying is that I get to be a player and I get to go through architectural horror?
Sure. If you have somebody who has a system and wants to run the game. I haven't backed it yet.
So, question out to the populace. Who or what system do you think would be best to run architectural horror? Let us know in the comments below.
Are you just going to keep saying architectural horror until I explain it to you what it is?
Yeah.
I think that's exactly what he's going to do.
Architectural horror is the idea that Alien would be an example of an architectural horror game or a horror movie where it's something that's man-made essentially for good that's corrupted in some way, like a lot of haunted house movies where the movie is possessed.
The movie is possessed?
Yes, the movie is possessed.
Like The Ring?
Like The Ring. Where the house, a lot of those movies where haunted houses where the house is corrupted in some way are architectural horror. The Shining is another good example of architectural horror because the hotel is essentially the monster. Not necessarily, isn't necessarily a monster, but the hotel itself is the monster. It's that sort of thing. If you listen to the most recent episode of Role Playing Public Radio, he and Rob Stith of the Orpheus Protocol have a pretty good discussion of what architectural horror is versus liminal horror, which some genres always confuse me a little bit, so it's kind of nice to find out. But liminal horror, for the record, is just strange places, like the backroom stuff that's kind of popular on the internet these days. Have either of you heard about that? Where there's There's creepypasta about the back rooms. It's a place you go that's infinite, and you kind of just wander around and weird shit happens.
What does creepy pasta have to do with anything?
Well, the back rooms is a creepypasta. Do you not know what creepypastas are either?
Nope.
You
have to do some research, Mike.
You have the internet, right? Like you exist on the internet. Like I know you look at things.
I'm just fucking with you, but that's okay. I was just gonna see how much you would explain. What's creepypasta?
I was wondering when you became
internet.
I was wondering when you became a Luddite.
Don't do that to Brent.
Right now.
Finally.
I was really confused for a second.
What's the internet, Brent?
I was like,
I've never heard of this thing.
Did Mike get a brain injury when we were podcasting? Mike,
we were talking about 6th edition.
You should go see a doctor. I think you're having. Do you smell toast?
Oh God, no, I don't smell toast. I smell naan.
But yeah, look up the back rooms. Those are pretty interesting. It's
Sure.
liminal horror versus architectural horror. If you would like to hear us discuss architectural horror or me discuss architectural horror more, or horror stuff in general, let us know in the comments. Because I could talk about that shit all the time.
Yep, and we'll even change our real plays from fantastical tabletop JRPGs to horrifying scenarios of doom, gloom, destruction, depression, anxiety, and such. And Brent will be running it.
Wait, I feel like there's an insult there.
Yeah, architect that, Brent.
I feel like there's an insult there that I'm not picking up on.
That's up to you. I mean, pick up on it if you want. But...
someday we will do a Delta Green. I do have a couple Delta Green adventures I would like to do on our live stream, but first we have to die or get captured in the Fabulous Ultimate game.
Noble sacrifice, here you come.
Noble sacrifice, here we come.
All right. Well, I think for
and on that note,
for today, I think we've reached the end of the end of the road. The journey stops here, the bus stop or something. I don't know. Insert whatever analogy you want. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to thank everybody for getting this far. I'm going to give it to Jeff. Then he's going to punt it over to Brent, and then we're going to sign off. So Jeff.
Hey, if you want to get a hold of us on our socials on X/Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, or Threads, it's at Rollwise. And if you want to email us, it's rollwiseguys@gmail.com.
And like, subscribe, comment, do all that YouTube stuff. This is your second reminder, in case you missed the first one that we so elegantly segued into. Thank you, everybody. If you made this as far, we really appreciate the recent subscribers and the recent commenters. And as always, roll well, roll wise, and be safe out there.
Night.
See you, everybody.